live on the Dusty Feet. Good evening. Hey, welcome. We're getting ready to start off, I guess, the new year. We had the last one, but this will be the first chunky, meaty thing of the new year, as we have Jim Wern with Emergent Life back in the house for our Follow the Red String series. We're going to enjoy this. This is going to get us to talk deeper about all kinds of things, and we were joking earlier that there's not enough time to unpack what I want to pack, and we'll only have a 5-minute, actually 4.5-minute video clip. But let's get the housekeeping stuff out of the way. Don't forget to subscribe, especially because that helps others get involved and engaged as well. It's something new I'm going to try is I've turned on the like-dislike, but I'm not going to use it the way YouTube uses it, meaning my numbers aren't enough to matter. Who cares for YouTube? So what I want is click it, the like, if there was something beneficial, something that was positive for you, something that connected with you or reflected with you. If it's negative, then do that too. Give it a thumbs down. And then please feel free to say in the comments what and why. Why the house? Because we don't learn. There's other things that we don't see. Things we take in consideration, those kind of deals. And so I think that's kind of important with this. That said, TheDustyFeet.com, that's the place to grab info. There we're going to have, at the TheDustyFeet.com, we're going to have the homework for the next video. For instance, next week we start our, what I call our homework series, right? So there's a link there to click to the video to go watch, because the video itself is like 40 minutes long. And if we did 40 minutes, we wouldn't have any time to talk. So what we'll do is we'll let you go watch that first. The link will be in the description of the video. So if when we're on that night and you're not, you can go watch it later. Okay. But it's important that you have it because that sets the context to the conversation. Makes sense. Just like tonight, Jimmy and I are talking, that'll set the context to the conversation. So, and we'll hit that again at the end. So tonight, let's get started with my brother on the Dusty Feet with Follow the Red String. And there he is, and we should be unmuted, so everything should be good. Okay. What's up, Jimmy?
Hey, not much. I'm hoping the audio sounds better. I have a very generous brother who sent me a microphone and a set of headphones that hopefully will make things a lot nicer.
Yeah, it's coming through loud and clear on here on this end, so that's a very good
Wonderful.
thing. Okay, so I want to throw this out to you. This is not a blindside. This is one of the things Heather and I were talking. I went and got. I have some new glasses on order. Right, I needed my prescription. I haven't gone to the eye doctor in like 2-3 years. Okay, so it was time. So I go in, and during the exam, it felt to me like, you know how they tell you better, worse, you know, number 1 or 2, 1 or 2, you know. And the question was never asked, is it clear? They just asked, is it better? 1, 2, better, worse, 1, 2, 1, 2, okay? And when I got my prescription, my right eye, when I got my glasses, I could tell that my right eye was fighting something. So I could cover up the eye and take a look, and it, I could see it was slightly blurrier. Okay, and I have progressive bifocal, so I had to make sure the alignment was right, and you're checking that you're look apples to apples. You know, I don't have them tilted or that kind of stuff, and it still felt off. So I went back in and said, "This is what it feels like," and then described some stuff. So they took me back into the exam room, redid the exam, and sure enough, the prescription was off. Okay.
Interesting.
So they're going to give me new lenses, which is wonderful. And the question was, should I have been more forthright in saying, like, for instance, it still looks blurry to me, or are they supposed to ask, is it clear? Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's an interesting point, because part of the assumption was, well, I think I know what you're doing. You're the one that's tweaking the numbers, and I have no idea what's on their side. I don't know what you're asking me. Meaning there's something associated to that. There's numbers, whatever, associated to you.
Right.
And I don't know what base you're coming from. She mentioned that the right eye now has a stigmatism in it that wasn't really apparent before that it is now. And I'm getting older, and I get it. I also have another loop in the mix. I have had LASIK surgery, and then it didn't really deal well enough with the the close stuff, computers to books, right? And I went back, and they wouldn't fix that, so I screw it, went back to glasses. So that might be a mitigating factor in all of this, but and I said, the awareness of me, and Heather said, yeah, you should have spoken up and said you didn't think it was clear. And I'm not disagreeing with her at all, but it's just one of those things where, at the time I'm thinking what I'm thinking. And so what do you think?
That's great. You're going to put me in the middle of a discussion between you and your wife.
Well, yeah, no. That's it. No, as a interested third party, right? There you go.
Well, as somebody, it's funny. I was just writing out actually an application. I just applied for it's actually a website called textbroker.com, and they farm out content writers. And I like to do writing stuff. And so I said, I'll try it and see. And sure enough, they signed me up. So I'm super excited about it. But in there, they asked you about your background. So I was writing down some things and realizing my bachelor's degree was in organizational communications. And one of the things that you're bringing up is a very inherent issue with regard to communication. Is communication goes both ways. And so there were assumptions on both parts. Probably doctor assuming you understood what he was asking in terms of better, worse, as opposed to clear, not. And you assuming if he wanted you to say clear, he would have asked you to say clear or not. And that's where I think even breakdowns in marriages, breakdowns in role relationships at work, when we make assumptions about what the other person is understanding. I remember an assignment, this is probably 20 years ago, when Don and I were struggling in our marriage, and we got a book by Harville Hendricks, How to Get the Love You Want, I think was the name of it. And in there, he had an assignment, which was to sit down and come up with a scenario. Here's the question. What do you think about this topic? What do you think your spouse thinks about this topic? And then what do you think your spouse thinks you think about this topic? And it was so eye-opening for us to see how we both actually, on 95% of the stuff, we both thought the same exact thing. But we thought the other person thought that we would think differently. And that's where we went, okay, now I realize how I need to make sure that I communicate. And that's what we talked about assignments like mirroring. When somebody asks you a question, you ask the question back. This is what I hear you saying. Right. And then that person has the opportunity to either clear up and say, that's not what I was asking, or to say, yes, that's exactly what I want to know. And that, cleans up the ambiguity. And in this situation, probably would have been helpful to say, okay, you're asking me better or worse. Are you asking me if it's clear? Gives them the opportunity to then clarify, and then you might not have to get a second pair of glasses.
Right. And you hit the exact point that was mulling at me, was the communication scenario and the assumptions on either side. And your scenario test, this scenario deal, is exactly the point. Yeah. We so often fill in somebody else's answers. I don't know how many times somebody will decide, I'm not engaged in this. I don't need to go talk to them because I know what they're going to say. I'm bugged about something, and you go, well, have you talked to them? And they go, I already know what they're going to say. That's the filling in their side of the equation, rather than saying you go fill in and then willing to understand that they might not see what you think. Right. And that's exactly where my brain was going in this, and I was going, wow, and this is something as simple as glasses.
Yeah.
And you go, if you can make that same stupid mistake with glasses, picture what you can do to screw up a relationship. Talk about blurry, wrong lenses. What the heck am I looking at thing that you could get? You go, oh my gosh. So
well, and overlay that then onto our relationship with God. We already assume what he's going to say because, hey, we've read the Bible.
Yeah.
We know what the responses are.
Yeah.
And yet how many times we need, and Paul reminds us, here's the truth about who you are in Christ.
That's it.
Why do you have to keep saying that, Paul? Because you keep forgetting.
Because you keep forgetting. That's it. Where we get this point where he tells you, this is how God views you, right? But so many people continue with the phrase, the I'm not worthy side. And you go, well, that's interesting because that doesn't match the book. Yeah. That matches what some, use the term, some Catholic teaching or something told you that you weren't worthy, needed to beat yourself with a stick or a nine tails or something, rather than going, the book tells you something very different. And but you were told that, so now you're trying to do something, and you think God wants something that he's not saying that's not what I want. So, and that's one of those pieces, which is a nice segue into what we're going to be talking about tonight. In this particular, it just happens to work that way. So tonight we're going to cover the Bible Project's. They're doing they started this year off on a Character of God series. And so they're catching the 5 or 6 the character of God statements, okay? And we understand, and we'll get into this in the discussion, of course, we know that it's not a description like blonde hair, blue eyes, tall, that's not what defines a person. What's interesting is you ask somebody, well, describe Bob to me, and are they going to tell you he's got gray hair, his beard and a deal, he's this tall, or somebody could tell you he's friendly, he's engaging, okay? Those are those character traits. And God, on the image side, I think we get wrapped up in how God should look. And I think we're missing, he wants the character reflection. I have created you with the capability to reflect my character. No other being can reflect his character created on earth as we can. Yeah. None. So how does that work? So I don't care if I look like a monkey. That has nothing to do with it. You can't reflect the character of God in that scenario. So when they do this, they're going to this point, and Bible Project's doing this. So it's about 4.5 minutes. And then, like I said, we're not going to have enough time to unpack everything we want to talk about. But so let's watch this. Bible Project, Tim Mackey, John Collins, on grace.
If you tried to describe what God is like, it could be difficult or daunting. But when the people who wrote the Bible pondered the mystery of God, they consistently describe God's character in this way: compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. We're going to look at the second key word in this statement, gracious. The Hebrew word is chanun, which is related to the Hebrew noun chen. This word, chen, is often translated as grace or favor, and if you study how this word is used throughout the Bible, you find a fascinating story. One meaning of chen is delightful or favorable. In the Psalms, a skilled poet is said to have lips of chen. That is, he can craft beautiful words that bring delight. Or a dazzling piece of jewelry is an ornament of chen. It attracts attention and favor. This is why chen is often the word used to describe a gift given with delight or favor. In these cases, chen could be translated as grace. Like in the story of Esther, who approaches the king of Persia to ask that she and her people be spared from death. She calls this a request for chen, And because the king delights in Esther, he favors her and grants her wish. So, giving a gift of favor is chen because it's motivated by delight. And the most extreme kind of chen is showing favor to someone who should get what they deserve, not a generous gift. Like Jacob, who cheated his brother Esau, ran away, and then after 20 years wants to come back and make things right. So he comes to Esau asking, "May I find chen in your eyes?" Jacob isn't asking for what is fair, but for favor. And surprisingly, that's what Esau gives him. He chooses to delight in his brother Jacob and show him grace that he doesn't deserve. Now, chen requires a generous spirit, which people sometimes have. But in the Bible, the one who shows more chen than anyone else is God. Like when God rescued the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, and they quickly betray him by giving their allegiance to a golden idol as their God. But then, Moses steps in and asks God to consider giving a gift that they don't deserve. And God says yes, by showing the ultimate act of chen, forgiveness and a promise to be with these people. This character trait of God is so reliable that over 40 times in the book of Psalms, people cry out for God's chen when they're sick or in danger or when the Israelites are in exile. And the biblical prophets like Isaiah looked back to God's chen in the past and boldly declared that God will one day show chen to his people by delivering them and all creation from death and ruin. Now, when we turn to the authors of the New Testament, they describe God's chen with the Greek word charis, which means gracious gift. Like when we're introduced to Jesus in the Gospel of John, we're told that Jesus is God's glorious charis become human, sent into a world of people trapped in darkness and death. Because according to the Apostle Paul, we're like the living dead. God has handed humanity over to the destructive consequences of our selfish decisions. But, Paul says, God is rich in mercy, and by his charis, he's rescued us. He's talking about how Jesus' life, death, and resurrection are offered to us as a generous gift of life that is more powerful than death. And as with any gift, all one has to do is receive it. So, now you can see why the biblical authors talk so much about this description of God's character throughout the Bible. When people are willing to own their failures and ask God for chen, he has a consistent and generous response. God gives the gift of himself, his life, and his love. And this is what it means that God is gracious.
Okay, so yeah, ton to unpack. Teresa made this point, and I thought this was a good one. Come on. There you go. It says, yes, I have a problem with not feeling worthy, but really none of us are. And she's a very good connection. And I think we mix the value of, I don't know, how do I want to put this? Somebody somewhere in our Western culture a long time ago decided that you weren't going to be worthy. Okay, because the story doesn't play out that way. We have this browbeaten into us that what we have is we might fail to hit the mark trying to have that relationship with God we should have, that we should be reflecting his character. That's more in a failure of choice in that scenario. It's not a worthiness to attempt that or to do that, as our ability to do it alone is a fair choice. But the fact that we have value, everybody has the same exact value. God doesn't love Paul more than he loves you. He doesn't love Moses more than he loves you. Okay? Scary thing, I'm going to stretch this. He doesn't love Jesus more than he loves you.
True.
Okay? And that'll stretch you a little bit in that thought. But the after is that, so your value is totally there. What you have is, are you, like any relationship, are you meeting the expectations of a relationship? And the big thing I've been talking about with a friend of mine was the covenant relationship. Any covenant relationship, business, marriage, God, they all have covenants. They all have requirements in the relationship, meaning expectations. Are we looking to meet all the expectations, or are we automatically looking for ways out? Our culture today automatically looks for prenups and clauses. We go into every covenant with an exit plan. Every covenant in our culture today has an exit plan. God's doesn't have an exit plan.
Yeah.
Okay? And he has no exit plan for you. You have an exit plan for you. If you choose to leave, that's it. But God doesn't build in an exit plan. And if you do this, then that scenario. God doesn't have an exit plan. You might, but he doesn't, because that's not his part of the equation. Okay, so that diatribe off. What hit you with this to start?
It was interesting. My immediate reaction in any topic is I want to go do a little bit of research. It's the scholar part that has to make sure we have all of our T's crossed and I's dotted.
Yeah.
And, even doing the word search on it, it was interesting that the word chen, or grace, in the Old Testament, in the Old Testament, that word only pops up 13 times, grace. In the New Testament, 112. But when he talks about gracious, which is, and I'm bad at English and grammar, gracious is an adverb, right?
Right. Right?
I'm so bad at this.
Right? Are we, okay. Or we'll both be wrong in that. That's cool. So, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. But we make it a noun when it's but in Hebrew, it's a verb, meaning it doesn't exist without action. Nothing exists in that character space without action. That character word doesn't mean anything. You can't draw grace.
Right.
You can't draw compassion. You can draw a picture that reminds you of an act of compassion. The story of Esther is a description of what an act of grace looks like.
Right.
But there is no, picture of grace in that. So yeah, it's a good point. It is a noun, but it isn't in the sense that without action, it's a word. Yeah.
Right. Because on one hand, you see acts of grace by God toward his people in the Old Testament, but you see more of grace exhibited in the New Testament. And so it's interesting that you've got 7 uses of it in the Old Testament, or what was it? 13 uses in the Old Testament, 112 in the New. But gracious, which was more describing the character of God, who he is, in the Old Testament, 76 times talking about God. In the New Testament, 9 times. So it's interesting how it kind of shifts its use from Old Testament to New Testament, not just linguistically, but its application.
Why do you think that? Because that's is it? Yeah. Why do you think that? That's a loaded question, mind you.
It is a loaded question, because I was trying to process that through and look at, we're not saved by love. It doesn't say in the Bible that love is what saves us. It says, for God so loved the world that he gave. But it says, for by grace you have been saved. So there's this, love might have been the igniter, the actuator, the initial character of God that put in play this salvation of mankind option for us. But it's grace that actually activates it. I mean, grace and belief, depending on how Calvinistic you want to be.
Right. Yeah.
In that. But grace has kind of stepped up in its significance or importance in God's plan, because it is something, and it goes back to that whole idea of this gift, this undeserved gift kind of thing, that God wants to shower on those he delights in. And that's what I think hit me in watching that video, is when it talks about, grace stems from a place of delight. Mm-hmm. And It's God's delight in us. It's God's delight in mankind. That is the reason he wants to shower this on us. And so I think that's why it becomes more important in the New Testament, as an object, basically, that God has given through salvation. This is this gift, this grace.
Right. Okay. So let's because this is a discussion I've had, not with you, but in another discussion, talking about the corporate engagement with God as a nation, right? As a people, mm-hmm. And then when we get out of that, right? The transition between the old and the new is it goes from a very corporate scenario. I mean, let's start with the ultimate corporate. The ultimate corporate is Abraham. Mm-hmm. Because what does he do? When God goes and they make this covenant, he has all the males in his entire camp circumcised. Okay. Right. That had zero to do with faith, zero to do with belief. And yet all of them were covenant marked. Okay? Because mm-hmm. It said slaves, everybody. So it does a unique thing in that sense, because it actually elevates the slave. The slave is getting the same grace treatment that the owner is. Mm-hmm. Okay? And God is marking them the same way he marks Abraham. They get the same treatment, slave and master, in that scenario. But it's corporate in the sense that it's all in this, and it starts with the head of Abraham and the agreement and how God interacted with that. And then we have the children as it goes through. Okay? So we have, the story of Esther. It's one of those interesting parts in the Bible where the word Yahweh is not mentioned in Esther.
Right. Not at all.
Right? No. We know they're talking about God because it's God's people they're talking about and what the scenario is. But he doesn't go to her. She doesn't go to him and plead on behalf of the God of, okay? She doesn't do that. She does entirely show us what a submissive spirit, mm-hmm. A humble spirit, a sacrificing spirit, mm-hmm. a spirit of risk, because she knows in there this can go wrong on so many levels that you're going to, when her and Mordecai are talking, and she said, if I'm going to go in there, I die. And Mordecai goes, if you don't go in there, we all die. Yeah. So it's going to happen either way. The only way to not have it all happen is for you to do that. And then God gets to work with the heart of a Persian king. Okay. Mm-hmm. And incline that heart, let that heart exercise itself as it does. And we have that story out. So now we transition out. Those people are now not a land, and they're not grouped like they are as the nation in size that they are, right? They're now in the diaspora, scattered. In that light still shines. And so now when the apostles are sent out to gather in the lost sheep, right? With them comes in that scheme of in the pantheon that are the gods all over the place, mm-hmm. right? That this God stands out. And there are now Gentiles that are doing that. And their gods say you're not worthy.
Right.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So you can see how that gets drug in, right? That's a synchronicity that's a fault we brought in, that synchronicity. So I need to address that more.
Right. Exactly.
Because it's mitigated. So I think that the context of the diaspora and those people make it. I don't think there's a transition in character of God or how he acts, merely that at that level, they don't have a corporate identity. They are not the children. They don't have a lineage. They don't see their tie to Abraham yet because they're not adopted yet, right? They haven't become, they're not grafted in the vine, right? In that setup. So I can see where gracious and grace and that flip, but I can see why the corporate children of Israel side versus now the diaspora scattered. Makes sense? Yeah?
Mhm.
Okay. So that draws some interesting stuff. So what else?
I've had this conversation over the years with a number of different people who, whenever there's a difficult situation in the church, typically it's somebody who's not behaving the way they're supposed to or whatever, and you need to deal with it. And the response from people, honestly, typically like myself, I don't like confrontation. I definitely do not like confrontation. And their normative response is, well, if I'm going to err, I'm going to err on the side of grace, which is okay.
And
it's still error. If you're going to err, you're saying I'm going to be wrong here, but I'm going to be wrong on the side of grace is still wrong. And I remember getting in some pretty heavy, heated discussions about, well, if you don't err on the side of grace, then you're being judgmental, and it's like, okay. And then I remember this was years ago. Donna and I, newlyweds, fresh in ministry. I hadn't even graduated, hadn't even started seminary yet. I was just finishing college. Okay. And I was working as a youth pastor in a church, and there was a church down in El Centro, California. And if you know anything about El Centro, it's, they talk about Bakersfield being the armpit of California. El Centro is like the space between the big toe and the second toe in California, just this nasty spot. And now I'm going to get in trouble if somebody lives in El Centro. Anyway, it was a church down there. I want to say, I don't know if it was Disciples of Christ or Christian Church background. But they were interviewing me, and one of the things they said is, do you believe once saved, always saved? The easy grace is what they called it, because they believe you can lose your salvation. And the term easy grace was the button. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like, grace is not easy. It never was easy. I don't think it's something easily distributed by God, because it cost him something to be able to give it. And it's not easily given by us. But it's still something that is a gift. And it is still something that is offered from a place of love. Needless to say, we didn't end up going that route, and I'm really glad, because I don't think I could have stood the heat of El Centro. But it made me think about God's grace and the significance of it, the value, I guess, of it. And watching this, it helps to remind me, especially when he's talking about that sense of God's delight in his people, whether at the time in the Old Testament, the nation of Israel, or in the New Testament, this new evolving church, body of Christ thing. And that just the fact that he's gracious with me says that he delights in me. And it's one thing. Grace can sometimes feel like this, mercy, I'm just going to be nice to you, even though you don't deserve it. But when I think of what's at the heart of it, this graciousness of God, it changes my perspective of why it's given, because I am so precious. I mean, spent the day with my granddaughter, and talk about understanding what delight is. Just this cute little thing. Oh my gosh, adorable. Absolutely delight in her. I'm her probably second favorite thing in the whole world. Number one is bath time, and number two is Pop Pops. That's what her mother said, not me. I'm just saying that's
DeRay. There you go.
She wants the most.
Yes.
When in reality, she pretty much just wants whoever's not there. If mommy and daddy are there, she wants Grammy or Papa,
right,
or Pop Pops. If we're with her, then she wants Dada and Mama.
Yeah.
But it's that sense of delight in who she is, regardless of how dirty her diaper is, regardless of whatever. It's her, and that's how God sees me. And that's why he wants to lavish his grace on me, because of his delight. And that stems from who he is. But it also pours into then who I am too.
And that's huge, because that goes back to exactly where we started this whole piece, is that you have value in this piece. And we think that we're not worthy on the scenario. And I disagree. I'm with you on that thought. I'm exactly there, where he bestows the grace because he has favor with you. He has delight in you. Okay? What we do in any relationship we have, I know, and you and I growing up, right? This is where people get a chance to see the differences with this, that mom could look at you the wrong way, meaning if you did something wrong, she could look at you the wrong way and you'd break down. Break down. Okay? Me,
Gonna beat the living crap out of you.
you beat the living crap out of me, and still wouldn't. I'm going to sit there in that chair until the food gets cold, not going to do, or I've been the deal, and they keep adding minutes to punishment, and that gets. However, that doesn't stop my mom from loving me, doesn't stop my mom from delighting in who her eldest son is. I didn't get that for the longest time. That doesn't make what I did anywhere near right. Okay, that makes my bullheadedness, which is an interesting part of confrontation, to say this. My flip, in a weird way, is the opposite, meaning I have to watch what I do in confrontation, because I have a history of not dealing well with confrontation. Someday we'll talk about my disastrous end to my 20-year military career, of which my parents and you are very well aware of. But then I had a very productive career as a soccer referee, where that's what you do, is do nothing but deal with confrontation. And how do you manage that confrontation on the field to where it doesn't overflow to everybody else? It doesn't disrupt life, i.e. on the pitch, this game. Dr. Wilbur talked about soccer as a microcosm of life, was one of the phrases that he did. Real authority, imposed authority, interactivity, people you like, people you don't like, people you like on the other side, people you don't like on your side, all kinds of things are in this. But my job was to deal with confrontation. That was my job. And I was pro level good at it. I could manage people at that ego level to handle those particular pieces. That was one of my skill sets in it. And it's helped me later on in life. Maybe the faults and lessons learned later on in life were part of the tooling that made me better at it there in the confrontation. However, there's still a little part of me that's that Paul got the thorn side deal, because I can take confrontation and I can get it. And if I feel like, screw it, well, I'll go and I'll jump in both feet, fangs and all, and I'm capable of doing that. That's the wrong side, right? That's that other side. So how we manage that, and when I can express grace to somebody on a pitch, on contrition, where they deserve a greater punishment, and they don't. The grace that God gives, understand, in our lot in lives, it has everything to do with our lives and nothing to do with our lives. Because this grace that we're talking about, not only is your value on your life, but he's saying that there's an eternal value to you, that I delight in being with you beyond this scope and time, because we only picture this scope and time, right?
Right.
And he's saying, I think you have value beyond this. Do you want to have that same relationship with me that goes to there? Who was it that? I don't know. It was Brad Scott. Somebody else will remind me. Anyways, but he said, God is looking for people that he wants to live forever with.
Interesting.
Okay, God is seeking the hearts of those that wants to live, the Queen song, who wants to live forever. Our thoughts in this are mixed up in the fold, because I think that in that grace and what the quote unquote, we won't get into that saved forever, once saved always saved scenario, but I'm saying that what we do in life has no value beyond here, or has no impact beyond here. I disagree. I say it very much does. That's what God is looking at in his character. If it didn't, then it wouldn't matter what we did ever. Death would be the quickest way out. Then you don't have to mess with the junk. And God's character never gets displayed, because I don't need to see it. Okay? I don't need to experience it. I don't need to have it impact me and then teach me how to make it impact on others. How do I show, like last time we talked, it was on compassion. How do we show compassion? So in this, how do we show grace? And you in particular, we talked about, is that how do we do that selflessly? If that has a value of sacrifice to it, then I'll vote for that. That in that thought, because there's a cost to grace. Grace is a gift, and we think, well, like anything, the government stimulus, it's free. No, it's not. There's a cost to it. And the ultimate cost was his son, and I can't fathom that. And so that value is not, it's given, it's not cheaply given, and it's not without relationship in giving it that way. But that grace point where it is a gift, meaning, and I'll get the unmerited favor, nothing that you did other than that I delight in you is why I give you a gift. We tend to give gifts to who? People we delight in. That's right. We don't necessarily do that. I do like the random acts of kindness thought of maybe I need to stretch ourselves beyond that and say, can I extend that gift to somebody that I don't know? That's hard.
Yeah.
Harder to make it a practical part. We can have these one-off moments, but is it part of your integrated life? Yeah?
I think one of the things that was unwinding as you were talking, and you explained your connection with soccer, and I think that was a really good, that helped me kind of get some perspective here. When grace is something that's given to make whoever you're giving it to their life better, as opposed to I'm giving it to make my life easier. That whole thing of err on the side of grace thing. I want to err because I don't want to deal with the potential negative impact of it. So
that's right. So
I'm going to give this.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily making their life better.
Right. I'm making my life better.
Or easier.
Right. Easier. Right. Better. Easier. That's right. I've made it easier on myself. Is that really? Yeah.
That tied into, if you look in the New Testament, and I'm blanking right now in terms of the Greek word for exhortation. But exhortation and encouragement are the same word. It's the context of what you're using it for. They both, it's parkaleo, there we go, because it means to come up alongside. And as I'm coming up alongside somebody, even for exhortation, the purpose is to make them better. Encouragement, to make them better. Sometimes I need to give a stronger word to make you better. Sometimes I need to give a softer word to make you better, because you're either feeling too good about yourself or not good enough about yourself. And that changes how I come up alongside. Yeah. And I think grace in the same way. And I saw that, I think, with you, with your reffing soccer, is the whole purpose, why you were able to be a little confrontive in a circumstance like that, is because you wanted to make those, I know this because we've had conversations about this, you wanted to make those players better. Yeah. You wanted to make that game the best it could be. Right. And to do that, sometimes you had to call out things and say, hey, no, you can't do that, because that doesn't make you good and it doesn't make this situation better. And so that's when you say, okay, there, that makes sense. And I think the same thing with grace. When we give it, it's given so that whatever the circumstance is going to change either the person's perspective of themselves or of God, or you're going to change their outcome so that they become better. And that's what God has been trying to do with us, and why he was a gracious God of the Old Testament, and he gives grace to those who need it, in the New Testament. And it's like, as you were talking about, oh, ding, you'd think I'd have learned this a long time ago, but it's all coming back to me now.
That's a huge point on the value of coming alongside. In the military, you had they started it in basic training, actually, where we used to jog as a flight. Okay, so we were in a formation, 4 or 6 wide by however many deep, right? And then we jog, and our requirement was to run 1.5 miles in X. Okay, I forget what the time was. I think basically it was easy. It was like 12 minutes, right? But you had to finish corporately. Everybody had to finish. So when you needed to come up alongside someone, sometimes you reach up under their arm and help them along. Sometimes just a light push in the back to encourage, maybe they were starting to hunch over, so you want to get them up to get your lungs open. The practical things that go with pick your head up. Pick your head up is not just about it. There's so much more that goes with your countenance if you pick your head up. Your shoulders come up, your lungs expand, you breathe better, your head's clearer. There's so much that happens with those pieces. And you come up alongside somebody. Getting in front of somebody and doing that doesn't do any good at all, and it can stop them and become very confrontational, whether I come up alongside you. You know how many times I would have a discussion with a player off, like our bodies were like this, not like this, but I'd give them a little open space. And sometimes I'd shield so that Schmuckatelli was behind me, right? And I could deal with it. Let's look this way. We can talk this way and do this. So we have ways to mitigate those particular parts. And then in that, I get to read your character. I get to see what you did. I get to listen to your repentance. Are you contrite? Biblical words to practical sides. I'm sorry in the deal. I've seen guys that have made the mistake and they get up, they had the cleats up and they pop up and their eyes are this big. They're like, holy crap, what did I just do? And you realize, I got it. The rest of the players all want to have this. And I said, I got this. My card's out. So everybody knows I have to deal with him, but how I interact with him is the key. I still have to show the yellow card, because the rest of the place needs to understand that that's not acceptable. Can I do more? Maybe. Do I need to be demonstrative? If you look at me like, yeah, he deserved it, I can go, we're going to have a little conversation here, and everybody's going to see by my hand gestures that I need to make a point. I have to speak to the crowd. I have told the guy in front of me, literally, I know you didn't mean to do this. It looked a lot worse than what it actually was. I get it. I said, my hands are going to tell the story that you better not do this again very demonstratively. I'm telling you, I get it. I understand. So big, huge hands. We're not going to see that again. Stop. Give that whole look. And then I'd say, now what you're going to do to me is smile and you're going to pat me on my chest. So I tell him, smile and that's it. So he'd go like, I get it, Bob. Sorry, give me that deal. Pat on the chest, like, okay, I get it. The rest of the stadium, the rest of the players go, he got it. The game can now come down to the level it's supposed to be. And we manage those pieces. And that's the fun in life. So now we bring this to life. And it's easy as a referee because technically I hold all the cards.
Right.
Okay. But I have a vested interest in everybody there. And I always approached my games, every single game I played, ref, Scotland, all over the globe, wherever I refereed.
I don't know how to respond to that.
My intention... My watch is talking to me. Yeah, thank you, Siri. With the New Zealand accent, because I just adjusted that. That my intention is always to meet you again. So in other words, my interactions with you were always based on Mr. Rogers, until we meet again, or what's that, happy trails to you or what? Anyway, so, but it was always on the expectation that we'd cross paths again. That didn't always happen, but my attitude was it's going to do, so that I didn't interact with you like, I'm never going to see him again. I don't care. But if I premised all my interactions with, I do care because I'm going to see you again in my head, my reaction to you is different.
Which is the danger right now in social media, is that people give reactions without seeing a person face to face.
That's it.
And without the consequence of relationship, that you're going to have to see them again and deal with what's going on. And I think that has been a disservice of social media. And not that I want to get into any of discussion, but the unfortunate outcome of that kind of communication that we've missed in the course of this pandemic.
Yeah, that's the bane of social media. There's a boon and a bane, right? And that is by far the Achilles heel. Yeah. There's no onus of relationship. I can say what I say. We happen to have a constitution that lets us say whatever we want to say within reason, right? And even that reason is getting out of reason, right? But nonetheless, how our country, don't think it's global, but think in this scenario, this is what we do and do that. But the boon and the bane is I do this without impotence, without care for consequence. So which means I'm not loving you when I'm saying it. And that goes back to Jesus, Yeshua, saying, you say nothing should leave your lips if it is not prefaced by love. If anything leaves your lips, if love is not the first thought that goes in with it, there's already an inherent flaw. Okay? And in social media, it's not the deal. I read some things, I don't react. People sit and watch them argue. You don't even know each other. You have no idea what's going on in their heads or anything that's going on. You have no clue. Both sides. And you go, take the time in a group. This is what we're talking about, to develop a web place that is a place where people want to engage and become connected. Even in the time where we can't physically touch, I think we can still have some connection in those places where my interaction with you is based on a love communication, right? And a God's love communication, not whatever's, okay? That I care about this in the setup. And the premise in the community is this is how we're going to choose to interact. It's a conscious effort, a conscious choice to do that. Because in the times we are, it doesn't let us do a lot of face-to-face. but also allows us to communicate broader than we've ever been able to. Where I can literally have a community, where I can have somebody in California, in South Carolina, in Georgia, in Florida, in Connecticut, and we can all have that connection and do that and how we respect each other and treat each other and love each other and do with that. Then when we get the chance to meet, that hug becomes more real because there's a character that's been displayed behind it. And you're right, with social media, it doesn't go. And trust me, the character doesn't play out that way. So how do we balance that out in a tough one with this? And like I said in the beginning, I don't want the first question when somebody says, how do you describe Bob to me? It's not, I don't want to hear gray hair, 5'7", did this. I want to hear that he cared, they loved. And in those, if in the words that they choose, I don't have attributes of God in that description, if it's not on my tombstone, epitaph, whatever, then I've missed the mark. Really, I've missed the mark. Because if anything, when you describe God's love and the sacrifice of his son, and his son's character said, you want to see the Father? I just lived out my life in my Father's care. I was an example of my Father's love. How bad does he love you? Just see. And then we can look back and see that. And then we have Paul that has to take that to a bunch of people that don't understand God's love because they didn't understand the children of Israel. They had no root in any of this. And so they're coming from a totally different place. And they need to understand how that interaction with this God is so totally different than the Pantheon up the street with columns and pay them their little bit and stay away from the temple prostitutes,
Well, and their backgrounds were all in other religions where, like you said, you're not worthy unless you perform a certain way, pay a certain due, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And they need to understand the character of God and his grace in their lives. And I think that's one of the things that my graciousness gets tested at the level of social media. And I have to stop and say, okay, first of all, that what they're saying is really not what is going on. There's something underneath that. And I know where I've been and I know the place. I mean, so I was talking the other day, back in my zealot days of Christianity and prior to going to seminary, having a t-shirt or a sweatshirt that said, a man shall not lie with another man, for it is an abomination to God.
Right.
Okay. That Bible verse. And I was in a program at Cal State University, San Bernardino, communications program. And the dean of that department was gay. And I'm thinking, why would I do that? How in the world is that showing God's love?
That's it.
And I'd stand out in front of an adult bookstore and try to preach, and it's like,
how is that showing God's love? Right?
It's not. It's not. Fortunately, the dean saw beyond that, and I was able to see beyond, the dean's behavior to who he was as a person, and we gained a mutual respect for each other, which is probably the best I could say in terms of.
That's a fair statement. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what happened was I had been indoctrinated in ultra conservative church theology. Right. And I didn't get to see a person who was actually gay. And I realized they're just people, that God loves just as much as he loves me, just as much as he loves Paul, just as much as he loves Jesus.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I went,
that's a chewer. Yeah.
Yeah. That God was gracious with me in that moment. And
that's grace.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
you didn't think you needed the grace there, right? That's the scary part. We think we're pointing the finger. It's that log twig thing, right? And we're so busy going, you need God's grace. And you're like, dude, the biggest guy that needs it looks in the mirror.
Yeah.
Then that's huge.
I think even when I began, and again, like you talk about your story, I've got my story. At some point, we probably should tell each other's story.
Yeah, we probably should. Yeah.
That in this broken place back in the mid 90s, and just realizing how I was no different than any other broken person. My self-righteousness began to crumble. I mean, literally just fall to pieces. And I saw the grace of God in ways I had never experienced. And I think that's what it is and it could be the danger of someone coming to Christ at a very young age who wasn't this terrible, rotten sinner, and if you come to Christ and later in life, you know what life was like before. And as a child, maybe it's a little bit different. We all need to come to a place of realization of what that gift really is and what grace really is.
Right.
It changes your perspective on everyone else. And I look at Paul now, and when Paul says, I'm the chief of sinners, I'm thinking, Paul, you're the most upright guy there is. But the more you've experienced God's grace, you realize the nuances of the places that it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. No, not these gross, erroneous places in our lives, but the fine-tuned little, I want to do my own thing, and that little bit.
Yeah.
And I realize how that was my little defiance. Nobody else sees it. Nobody else knows it. Right. I know it. God knows it.
Right.
And I get to experience grace in that place in an even deeper way than I even thought I could ever.
Yeah. And so I'll leave this with a hanger because we're at time.
Man, it's time again.
I know. It jumps so fast. I know. So I'm going to leave this as a very open hanger here. And this is going to be like, what? How can you take this away? Okay. It's a free gift. Okay. But we've already talked about it's a gift that receiving it affects you. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I would say if something hasn't affected you, do you really have it? Okay. That's an open-ended question, which I have a whole other deal. You guys can talk amongst yourselves with coffee tomorrow as you go and go. That's the deal to say that saying I have something doesn't mean you have it. Saying I have something doesn't mean you have it. When it changes you, it shows you have it. Just a chewer and a thought. So, thanks. Yes, time is the deal. We're going to have to figure out how to do these. And we're running out. That was a 5-minute video.
Yes, so, I know. And
we didn't unpack, like I said. And that onion.
Bible verse.
Yeah, we didn't get it. That's it. We're going to get Jesus wept. Okay,
yes.
Good. We might get that in maybe in an hour. So, okay, thanks. Let me close this up and then we'll get back. We'll talk offline. So hold on. In an hour. So there you go. Okay, thanks. Let me close this up and then we'll get back. We'll talk offline. So hold on. In an hour. So there you go. Okay, thanks. Let me close this up and then we'll get back. We'll talk offline. So hold on.
That was weird.
In an hour. So there you go. Okay, thanks. Let me.
Why am I in a loop?
Close this up and then we'll get back. We'll talk offline. So hold on.
That's really weird.
In an hour. So there you go. Okay. Oh, that was really weird. I don't know what that was about. Oh, that's why. Okay. Ooh, that was weird. Okay. So all the video that we had, that was really strange. All the video that we have, the videos we have, our links are in the description. Please watch them again. And please go check out each of the sites that we talk about. This has to be Bible Project thing. Go listen to it again. See how it affects you. See what it does to you. Because that's important, how it works. And go listen to it again. See how it affects you. See what it does to you. There we go. I know what that is. There's a mute. I have to make sure to set the scene up so that's muted. There we go. Bob, lesson number 2. Thank you very much. There we go. And there's Jimmy laughing in the background. Okay. So we have, And again, at TheDustyFeet.com, we're going to have the homework for whenever we're having them. We'll post them and see updates, things we've talked about. place where you can ask open-ended questions. Again, I'm starting to click the link on these videos, so tell me if it's there. That there should be a like or unlike. If this was beneficial, if it affected you, if it touched you in any way, hit the like. If you didn't like it or something you didn't agree, then hit the down. I don't care what YouTube says to that. That talks to me, and just I'll use their tool for whatever we choose to use it for, right? That works that way. Go to TheDustyFeet.com. It'll have the live feed anyways on those. Next week, the 21st, is we're starting the Tim Mackey series on Matthew. I figured a good place to start to study the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament. Let's start the beginning. So we'll start at Matthew. So I think he has a wonderful series with this. So the first episode's there. It's like 40 minutes or so. So the link's there. Click on it. Listen to it. And then we get to next week. You'll already know we've had a pre-conversation before we even started, right? We already know we're on the same page. I mean, we've heard the same thing, and then we can talk about it and discuss. So that said, thank you for hanging out with Dusty Feet. Thank you for Jimmy. I know appreciated it. So, and we'll see you next week on the Dusty Feet.